everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we're bringing you how to play Underleague. Now this is a game where you have collected a host of different types of creatures and you're going to be fighting them against other players, but the actual winning and losing of your creatures isn't really the thing that you have to worry about so much as correctly betting on whether or not which creatures are going to win or lose. So let's get right down to the table and I'm going to show you how to play Underleague. Hey everybody, real quick, I also want to let you know before we get into the rest of the video about a contest going on for this t-shirt right here from Mr. Meeple. Check the link in the description below for the contest entry, and you've got until about the end of March 2019 to get your entries in, and hopefully you can win this t-shirt from Mr. Meeple. And if you haven't checked them out before, definitely go check out their website. It's pretty awesome. Okay, to the video. Each identical creature deck contains 30 different creature cards. Creature cards can be identified by the brown back. There are 3 types of creature cards, and these can be distinguished by the color of their value indicator as well as the frame. Beasts are green, constructs are red, and spirits are gray. Strategy cards, which can be identified by their black backing, come in a 250 card strategy deck, which contains 40 different cards in varying quantities. There are 2 types of strategy cards, scheme cards and equipment cards. The quickest way to tell the difference at a glance is that only equipment cards have the value modifier. Scheme cards do not. Let's take a quick look at what players will find on creature and strategy cards. The name of this creature is the Angler Shark. It has a victory point value of 1. This text down here describes the effect of the Angler Shark. The Angler Shark has a day power of 1 and a night power of 1. This equipment strategy card is called the Iron Tusks. Its effect is described in this text box at the bottom of the card. It has a cost of 1 and a value modifier of 0. The objective of the game is to have 20 or more victory points at the start of a round. Players add up their victory points through a combination of their creature values and their victory point cards. We'll discuss both of those in more detail shortly. Players will announce their victory point total during each preseason phase, and if 1 or more players have 20 or more victory points, the game immediately ends and the player with the most victory points wins. The tiebreaker goes to the player with the most strategy cards in her hand, and if there's still a tie after that, the players share the victory. To set up the game, first shuffle the strategy deck and place it near the center of the table. This plastic card holder does not come with the game and is just something I have for some of my games that have larger card decks. Place the 2 sets of dice in the center of the table next to the strategy deck. Each player then takes one of the creature decks, shuffles it, and places it in front of herself. Place a set of 5 identically colored betting chips in front of each player. Each player then looks at the top 3 cards of her creature deck without revealing them to anyone else. She then chooses one of those cards and places it face down in front of herself. The other 2 are placed at the bottom of her creature deck. Each player then repeats this process 2 more times, looking at 3 cards, choosing one to place face down, placing the other 2 at the bottom of the creature deck, until they all have 3 cards face down in front of themselves. All players then turn these 3 cards face up simultaneously, and these 3 creatures form the player's starting stable. Throughout the game, the strategy deck will remain in the middle of the table. A shared face-up discard pile of strategy cards will form next to the deck as players begin discarding strategy cards. Each player will have a creature deck in front of her at all times, and next to the creature deck, she will accumulate a pile of face-down strategy cards. Cards in this pile are referred to as victory cards. Each player will also have at all times 3 face-up creature cards in front of her, forming her stable. These creatures may also have equipment attached to them. Attached equipment is placed directly below the creature is attached to. Creatures may have any number of equipment cards attached to them. During the game, players will generate a hand of strategy cards. These cards should be kept secret from the other players, and a player has a maximum hand limit of 8 cards. A player's betting chips will always be kept in her chip pool directly in front of her or attached to creatures in play. We'll discuss in detail exactly how a player attaches chips to creatures in play, but for now just know that they must be placed directly on or directly above the creature they're attached to. Let's take a look at some of the key terms players should be familiar with when playing Underleague. An active creature is aligned vertically like this, while an exhausted creature is rotated 90 degrees sideways. When a strategy card is discarded, it is placed in the central discard pile face up. Generally, when an effect requires a player to discard a card, it must be discarded from her hand of strategy cards. Dominance abilities are found on some creature cards and equipment cards. When a creature with a dominance ability, or when a creature with an equipment card that grants that creature dominance ability wins a fight in which they were the attacking creature, that ability activates. For example, with the Raven of the Spires, its dominance ability says you may discard up to 2 strategy cards, then draw cards equal to the number you discarded this way. And it could do this if it was the attacker and if it won that fight. When a player is instructed to draw a card, she takes the top card of the strategy deck and puts it into her hand. However, it's important to realize that if a player has 8 cards already, then she may not draw any cards and instead ignores the order to draw. If a player would ever need to draw from the strategy deck, but it's empty, she instead first shuffles the discard pile, and after shuffling it, creates a new strategy deck. The first player is decided at the beginning of each round and will be the first player to take actions during the phases of that round. Play then proceeds clockwise around the table from the first player. When a creature is transferred, the player transferring it, which normally will be the creature's owner, places it on the bottom of the owner's creature deck. Then the player looks at the top 3 cards of that creature deck, chooses one to keep, and places the other 2 on the bottom of the creature deck in any order. If the creature that was transferred had any equipment attached to it, then that equipment will be discarded into the strategy card discard pile. Any betting chips that were attached to the transferred creature are now attached to the new creature instead. As previously mentioned, victory cards are strategy cards that are kept face down next to the player's creature deck. When instructed to take a victory card, a player takes the top card of the strategy deck and places it in her victory card pile. It's important to note that players may not look at her victory cards. Victory points are calculated by adding together the number of victory cards in the victory card pile with the total value of the creatures in the player's stable, including any equipment attached to a creature. So in this case, the player has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 victory points. Underleague is played over multiple rounds, each of which are divided into 3 phases. Preseason is phase 1, phase 2 is betting, and combat is phase 3. During each phase, the players will take turns taking various actions. It's likely that the timing of these actions may become an important issue on occasion, so let's take a moment to discuss how to resolve any potential timing issues that may come up. If at any point during the phases 2 or more players are required to take an action at the same time or make a decision at the same time, then the player who is the active player makes her decision first or takes her action first, and then play continues clockwise from there with that action. If a single player, on the other hand, has multiple choices to make or multiple actions to resolve, she chooses the order that all of that is resolved in. At the beginning of the preseason phase, each player calculates and announces her current victory point total. As we previously mentioned, this player has 8 victory points. If at this time 1 or more players has 20 or more points, the player with the most points immediately wins. In the case of a tie, the player with the most strategy cards in her hand wins. If no player, however, has 20 or more victory points, then the round proceeds as normal. After calculating victory points, the players determine who has the lowest victory point total, and that player is declared the first player for the round. If 2 or more players are tied for the lowest victory point total, the first player is the one with the fewest cards in hand. If there is still a tie, determine the first player randomly amongst the tied players. For every round after the first round, the third step of the preseason is known as mustering. It's very important to remember, though, that mustering will be skipped during the first round of the game, and instead, players would draw a starting hand of 5 cards. However, most of the time, obviously, players will perform mustering steps, so let's discuss that now. During the mustering step, each player, beginning with the first player, performs all of the following actions in order. The player moves any exhausted creature's inner stable to the active position. The player draws strategy cards from the strategy deck equal to the number of chips she has in her pool. If the player controls 3 creatures of the same type, she would draw an additional strategy card. In this case, she does not. She has 2 spirits and 1 beast. The player now collects any chips from the play area that are not currently in her pool. At this point, she should always have 5 chips. And finally, the player decides to either invest in strategies or transfer a creature. If the player invests in strategies, she draws an additional 2 strategy cards. If she instead chooses to transfer a creature, she chooses one of her creature cards and transfers it in the manner we've previously discussed. Once the first player has completed all of the actions we just mentioned for phase 1, play proceeds clockwise to the next player, and then once all players have completed these actions, the game proceeds to the betting phase. In the betting phase, players will place bets on creatures. Chips are placed one at a time until all chips have been placed. Betting chips are placed win or lose side face up. And by doing so, players are gambling that the chosen creature will, as I'm sure you may have guessed, win or lose. Betting is an incredibly important aspect of Underleague, since the more bets a player wins, the more cards she will draw during the next preseason phase. There are 2 important restrictions with regards to betting that players will need to remember. The first bet each player makes in a round must be on one of her own creatures. And players may not bet on creatures they have already bet on. Therefore, each of a player's 5 chips will be on a different creature. Once every player has attached all 5 of their betting chips to creatures in play, the game moves to the combat phase. To begin the combat phase, the first player takes a combat turn. During a combat turn, a player may perform one or both of the following actions: make a challenge and play a strategy card. Once the first player has elected to pass the turn after doing one, both, or neither, play proceeds clockwise around the table with the next player taking a combat turn, and so on. There is no limit to the number of combat turns players may take. Play passes around continuously. Once a full circuit of the table is completed with all players not making any challenges or playing any strategy cards, the combat phase ends and the next round begins. Let's discuss the 2 actions a player may take during the combat phase in detail. To make a challenge, a player performs the following actions in order. First, she chooses one of her active creatures and exhausts it. This will be the attacking creature. She then chooses any active creature controlled by an opponent. That creature will be the defending creature, in this case, the animate penumbra. The defending player chooses whether the fight will happen during the day or during the night. Then, based on that decision, each player rolls 1, 2, or 3 dice based on the day or night value of the creature. We'll say the defender chose night, and since the animate penumbra has a 2 value for night, it will roll a d6 and a d4. Meanwhile, the chimney gremlin has a 1 value, so it will only roll a d6. We'll discuss exactly what these values mean more in just a minute. The sum of the dice rolled is the creature's combat total. So the animate penumbra rolled a 7, and the chimney gremlin a 6. If either player is entitled to any rerolls, at this point each player, starting with the active player, declares which dice she will reroll. All players reroll their selected dice simultaneously, and no dice may be rerolled more than once. The creature with the highest combat total wins the fight, so in this case, the animate penumbra. And ties go to the defending creature. So exactly what do these day or night values mean? If a creature has a 0 value, then that creature will roll no dice in combat. If it has a 1 value, as this creature does during the day, it will roll 1d6. If a creature has a 2 value, it will roll 1d6 and 1d4. And if it has a 3 value, it will roll all 3 dice. These dice combinations should be relatively easy to remember, but if you do have any trouble remembering, page 10 of the rulebook has this chart to remind you. Once a winner has been decided, the following actions are performed in order. First, all successful betting chips attached to either creature involved in the fight are returned to their owner's chip pools. As you can see, both players bet on this creature losing, and both players bet on this creature winning. So both players are going to get their chips back. Now let's say fortune had changed just a little bit for the animate penumbra, and it had rolled a 5 instead of the 7 it rolled. In that case, it would have lost. And if the attacking creature wins and the defending creature loses, that defeated defending creature becomes exhausted. And the attacking player gains a victory card. At this point, if any card effects were triggered by the outcome of the fight, such as dominance abilities, those would be resolved. If the attacking player, however, loses a fight, the defending player does not get to take a victory card. Her reward is not having to exhaust her creature. It's important to remember, a player may only get a victory card when she is the attacking player. After a fight, any unsuccessful betting chips remain on that creature. So let's say that this player had bet on the Chimney Gremlin to win. In that case, this chip would stay on the Chimney Gremlin. If the creature is involved in another fight later in the combat phase, the owner of this chip may have another chance to return it to her pool. In addition to making a challenge, a player may also play up to 1 strategy card on her combat turn. The 2 types of strategy cards, as we've previously mentioned, are equipment and scheme. The rulebook on page 11 details very specifically when equipment cards may be played and when scheme cards may be played. Equipment may be played before making a challenge, after resolving a challenge, or when declining to make a challenge. Scheme cards may be played before making a challenge, when declining to make a challenge, after the defending player chooses the type of fight but before dice have been rolled, after dice have been rolled but before re-rolls have been declared, after re-rolls have been declared but before they have been rolled, after the attacking and defending players have re-rolled dice but before a winner of the challenge has been declared, after resolving a challenge, and it should be noted that some cards have additional timing restrictions which are detailed on the cards themselves. To play a strategy card, a player performs the following actions in order. First, the player announces that she is playing a strategy card and then reveals it from her hand. If the strategy card she is playing is equipment, as this one is, she also announces which creature she is attaching it to. The player then pays the cost of the strategy card, in this case 1. To do this, she discards a number of cards from her hand equal to the cost printed on the card she is playing. If the strategy card is a scheme, such as Lay Bare, its effect resolves and the card itself is then discarded. If instead it is an equipment, it is placed on the announced creature and its effect begins and remains ongoing until it is discarded. Once a player has made a challenge if desired and played a strategy card if desired, her combat turn immediately ends and play passes to the player to her left. Players continue taking combat turns until an entire circuit of the table is completed with all players playing neither strategy cards nor making a challenge. This ends the combat phase and play continues into the preseason phase of the next round. And that's how you play Underleague. There are also included alternate rules for deck construction and setting up a draft league, but I'll leave those for you to read on your own. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching, and until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.